It is the top of the hour. Jennifer, do you want to take it over?
Sure, great. Thanks everyone for being here. Good afternoon if you're on the East Coast. Good morning if you're in other parts of the country. We are delighted that you came to our Futures Forum conversation today on universal inclusion. I'm a member of the Content Development Committee at the college, and I'm very pleased to have brought this program to you. And as I understand it, we have record-breaking attendance today on this webinar. So clearly everyone is interested. Just to recap what we're going to be discussing today, as I think everyone on the call is aware, in 2020 with the social unrest, law firms really decided that they needed to take action when it came to D&I. And I think we're all feeling and involved in some way, regardless of where we sit in our firm, in that effort, and the very important effort. But however, law firms have a huge blind spot, and most of our D&I programs have been focused solely on the lawyers, and that excludes as much as 50% of our talent pool from consideration. The caste system environment that is inherent in most law firms is not sustainable for firms who wish to achieve success in the future. In September of 2020, Calibrate Legal launched a research program, Calibrate ID, with several law firms to measure the diversity of their business services. The hypothesis is that there will be, in fact, a large number of employees reporting as diverse in the non-exempt ranks, but that we will realize a significant disparity when reviewing data within the exempt and management ranks. And so with that, I would like to turn it over to Jennifer Johnson at Calibrate Legal, who was the architect of the Calibrate ID program and has put together this panel today. Thanks, Jen.
Yeah, thank you, Jennifer. Thank you so much for offering the opportunity to speak. Thank you to the College of Law Practice Management and to my fellows for supporting this endeavor and giving us this platform to tell our story about Calibrate ID. And I'm so excited to have with me today three of our 10 participating firms. We've got 3 here with us today, and we'd love to tell you the story about the evolution of this program, the benefits of the program, and our vision and hopes for the future. So thank you for joining us. Just a couple of housekeeping things before we get going. It's probably best if you have speaker view as your default here so that you can see one of the 4 of us as we're contributing to the conversation, because we've got a sea of people right now. We're sitting at 59 people, so that will help you be able to see who's speaking. This session is being recorded, so that box is being checked. The session is being recorded. We are going to have some polling questions. We'd love your participation in those. And if you have questions, please send them directly to me, or you can just chat them to the group. I'm also going to be referencing a couple of articles and resources throughout the course of the conversation, and I'll put those in the chat as well. The recording will be available within 24 hours after the program. So again, thank you all for being here. We welcome your thoughts and comments, and I know that Tommy, Maithili, and Brian would also welcome to hear from any of you afterwards about their participation in this program and how to become involved. So with that, I'd love to just start. I'm Jen Johnson. I'm the CEO of Calibrate Legal. I'm honored to have been inducted as a fellow of the College of Law Practice Management back in 2018. It's an amazing organization. It's a cross-disciplinary organization of people within the legal infrastructure. So not just law firms, you've got the judiciary, you've got law schools, all kinds of people that make up our ecosystem. And it's a wonderful forum to be able to learn from one another and share perspectives. So thank you again for this and for being here. I was the architect of Calibrate ID, as Jennifer mentioned, and I'm going to go into sort of the history of the why of that in just a few minutes. But first, I'd love to ask my fellow panelists today to introduce yourselves, give us a little bit of scoop on who you are and your perspective as we move through this conversation. Maithili, will you go first?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Maithili Pradhan. I am Manager of Diversity at Ballard Spahr, and I'm based in Philadelphia. And in my role, I work with our Chief Diversity Officer and specifically focus, as Jen mentioned, on ensuring that our diversity and inclusion strategy and programs really do apply across the entire firm to our lawyers and our staff as well. And so this panel, when I got the invitation to be on it, was right up my alley. I'm very excited to be here. Thank you. And then just for a little background on myself, I started my career as a human rights lawyer and then transitioned into working in corporate social responsibility and diversity and inclusion, and worked within consulting and within a corporation, and then finally landed at Ballard early last year, actually a couple of weeks before the pandemic really took off. So I'm thankful to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for taking your time, the gift of time today, to talk with our audience. Tommy, you're up.
Yes, thank you, Jen. So welcome, everyone. So I am Tommy Shee. I am the Director of Inclusion and Diversity for Bryan Cave Leighton Paisner, based in the New York office. Prior to that, I also led diversity at another law firm. And prior to that, I led diversity for Mercedes-Benz USA from the corporate side. I started my career as a litigator for a large New Jersey law firm, and then joined Mercedes-Benz USA as an in-house counsel. So looking forward to today's discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Tommy. Brian.
Thanks, Jen, and hello, everyone. My name is Brian Colucci. I've been in the legal marketing field for almost 25 years and currently CMO for Kilpatrick Townsend since 2011. You know, over that time, I've seen how the conversation about lawyer diversity and inclusion has evolved, and came to this discussion based on the simple realization that for the legal profession as a whole to address diversity and inclusion, it needs to think beyond just the lawyers. And legal professionals, note that I didn't use the term non-lawyers, just like I wouldn't use the term non-doctor or non-anything really, make up I think about 40% of the entire profession. I did some amateur sleuthing. So I think we should at least be having a conversation about what diversity and inclusion looks like among that group and how it impacts the legal profession as a whole. So looking forward to talking about it.
Yeah, at Calibrate Legal, we call the non-lawyers revenue enablers, right? The lawyers are generating the revenue and the rest of the business is enabling them to do so, right? Without everybody else, you wouldn't have a business that's thriving, right? So, and that's really sort of 3 years ago, I wrote an article, and I'm going to pop a link here for everybody, but it's called, I wrote it for law.com, and it's called Talent is Your Biggest Asset, All of the Talent. And it was one of the things that was really on my mind a few years back, where I was like, you know what, everybody's talking about innovation, right? And it's centered usually innovation around technology. And my premise for this piece was actually a law firm who looks at its talent holistically, that'll actually be innovation for a law firm, right? Because so much is focused on the lawyers all the time. But the reality is a truly healthy business is fueled by 40, 50% of a workforce that are not lawyers, or maybe they're not practicing lawyers anymore, right? And the premise too was, if you think about the word asset on a balance sheet, right? If you're actually going to pay somebody to do something at the law firm, even organize the napkins and fill up the coffee in the conference room, you're putting a value on that activity, right? And if those people don't feel valued as part of the business, as part of the ecosystem, they might not stay around. And the firms who figure out that everybody is important are probably going to have a more robust and more successful retention strategy as we look forward into the future. So scroll forward a couple of years, and it really hit me as we, particularly on the marketing side of the house in terms of recruitment, we have a talent shortage. There's too many open positions to go around for all of the people with legal marketing experience to fill those positions. And typically the firms want plug and play, plug and play. And there is certainly amazing room for subject matter experts, right? People who understand law, there's a place for that. But the reality is there's just not enough of those people to go around to fill all the positions. So as we were bringing talent to law firms from outside, they were so resistant to it, so resistant. And then those who did get inside of a law firm, there was no training, there was no development. They were asking questions about, you know, they're coming out of the Big Four, for example, and they're like, great, what's the career plan? What's the path to promotion? I can't answer those questions because most law firms haven't really put that into place on the staff side, right? And so as the events of last year were unfolding, it really caused me to, you know, start talking about this in different roundtables. Brian was a part of one of them, the CMO over at Ballard Spar, Amy was part of one of those, a couple of other people. And it really just started gaining momentum of maybe if we banded together and got some firms together to look at this topic, maybe we could do something about that. Maybe we could raise the awareness, right, about a healthy business and the fact that it's not just the lawyers that contribute to a healthy business. There's a piece that actually came out yesterday, Harvard Business Review. My colleague Anna actually sent it to me this morning, so thank you, Anna, for that. And the quote that she pulled, I'm going to put this in the chat for you guys, but listen to this. And this is law firms to a T, but it's also nice to know it's not just law firms that struggle with this, but it says, relatively little is spent on measurable training to help workers move up, even among companies making great efforts to recruit a more diverse workforce. Once you're in, you're on your own. The net effect of an exclusive focus on recruitment is an unintended glass ceiling for those laboring further down the org chart as it shuts down opportunities for advancement. And we're going to talk about pipelining issues. We're going to talk about the fact that most people who come into law firms on the business side don't actually know that it's a thing until they fall into it. I mean, that's certainly how I got into it, right? People don't know that law firms could be a destination for a career path unless you're a lawyer. So we're going to dive into all of that. That really is just sort of the history of how this program came to be. And it really is focused on universal inclusion. Inclusivity is something I think we can all get behind. I mean, I have 7, almost 8-year-old twins, and from the minute they were able to understand my words, it's we include other people, we share. It's a basic human thing to want to be included. And the healthiest, most robust, most successful law firms of the future are gonna have cultures like that. So it's time to start thinking about that now. So I would love to start by asking you guys, our panelists, what caught your eye about this program, and why did your firm say yes? Tommy, will you go first on this one?
Sure, thanks, Jen. So, absolutely agree with all your statements about the need for inclusivity. And I think at BCLP, we had started that conversation, that focus before we received the invitation to join the Calibrate ID program. And I think that, what I want to get across today is from our perspective, and my personal perspective, is that you have to look at the context of what's going on outside the law firms, right? I think historically, law firms were very sheltered. You walk through the door, you put everything aside, and you did your work. I think that's changed since, George Floyd, absolutely since George Floyd. And I think that for us, the watershed moment was the realization that these external events affect our colleagues differently. In a lot of cases, the George Floyd and the subsequent, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, those affected Black colleagues differently, to the extent that, some Black colleagues could not come to work because they were so affected by those events. And I think that is the watershed moment from the inclusive standpoint, that if you don't come from that community, you may not realize the extent of those external events affecting you, such that you can't do your work. And that's where, from a business perspective, from a culture perspective, law firms have to realize that, as you said, Jen, if you're excluding more than half of your employee population and you're ignoring that these, traumatic external events are affecting their ability to work, that's an issue. And I think fast forward today, and an example of how, George Floyd is so fresh is that the trial started 2 weeks ago. Massive coverage. It's almost bringing back those wounds again. And it's absolutely unbelievable that this past week we had yet another shooting in Minnesota, Dante Wright, right? So that, and you couple that with the horrific killings in Atlanta. So unfortunately, these external events that relate to diversity and racial justice and equity are still there. They will be there. And I think that the importance of inclusion, as we're talking about today, is that you cannot, ignore half of your firm population in light of these, consequences of these external events. So let me pause there, Jen.
Yeah, and expect that they're going to just keep moving forward as normal, right? I mean, one of our participating firms, Hush Blackwell, their chairman gave us a quote in support of this and was like, we need to look like the communities in which we work, right? And the reality is law firms, lawyers are at the center of everything that goes on in our universe, socially, politically, environmentally. I mean, the law firms have the potential to set a standard here if we all get together and push the agenda forward. Maithili, what was it about this program that attracted Ballard Spahr?
So I'll speak from my personal experience starting in this role, right, where, as you mentioned, my role doesn't exist in many law firms, but focusing in on staff, it was very apparent very quickly that we have a wealth of information when it comes to lawyers and diversity. We have industry standards, we have benchmarking, we have internal and external data. And then when it comes to staff, we have our internal data, and we can certainly poll our internal staff, right, and find out what they need and what we can be doing. But then there's nothing external really that exists to benchmark against, to see what the industry standards are, to really look outwards for inspiration. And so we're kind of creating everything internally. And so I thought this was a really great opportunity. And, you know, with Amy, for example, also connecting the two of us, you know, I think it was very clear that it would be a really great synergy, right? To find ways to connect with other law firms that are interested in making diversity and inclusion something that is firm-wide and not just focused on lawyers. And then to see, you know, what are people doing? What's the need that people are seeing? Because lawyers and administrative staff, although some needs will be the same, there will certainly always be things that are different, right? And you mentioned, for example, career pathing and professional development. That's one of those things where we have a fairly clear idea of how that works on the lawyer side of things. We know what we need to do. We're already working on that. But then for staff, there is this kind of dearth of information that's out there. And so that was really attractive for me personally. And I'm excited to connect with other law firms who are also interested in doing this.
Yeah, I mean, in my travels and sort of pitching this program to various firms, I haven't met very many people whose sole focus is on the staff. I mean, and by the way, for any of you in a D&I role, regardless of title, level, whatever, in a law firm, there is a realization and an understanding that you are all usually very overstretched. You're asked to do a lot with a little. And so I just want to acknowledge that as being a true, real thing, and leave that there. Brian, what was it about this? And you come at this from a little bit of a different angle, right? Everybody will notice that Tommy and Maithili are D&I professionals. Brian is on the marketing side of the house. So tell us about your thoughts here on this.
Sure. You know, as Tommy mentioned, I mean, the events of last summer did have a profound impact on my thinking. You know, we've said about the pandemic and about, and I think it applies to the social unrest that we had as well, that we're all in the same storm, but we're not in the same boat. You know, I kept really close tabs on my team over the summer and talking with people one-on-one. That really hit home to me. And I started thinking about kind of not just diversity in legal marketing and in firm administration generally, but inclusion, right? And how and how the number of diverse professionals at higher levels in our organization, right? So that was, it caused me to focus on that. But the thing that really, I think, led me to get in touch with Jen, among other things, was the realization that I don't know, I've probably of thousands, the number keeps growing in my head, but let's just say, you know, 2,000 RFPs we've had from clients in the last 5 years. Not a single one has ever asked about diversity and inclusion
yet.
On the staff side.
Yet. It's coming. I promise you it's coming.
Yeah. So that was, and many of our clients we do a lot of intellectual property. Many of our clients are technology companies who themselves have significant problems with diversity and inclusion, as everyone knows, and as they would admit. And so getting back to the same storm, different boats. I mean, I really would love it if we could tackle this problem with our clients rather than our clients putting all the focus on law firms and saying, and just drilling us for information about how we're doing, but only in this one little category, or not, this one category. I guess the category is half, right? We only want to know about how you're doing with lawyers. And my response is, well, doesn't, everyone should matter in this equation. And if you're asking for information on how our firm views diversity and inclusion, you should be asking how the whole firm views it, not just with respect to lawyers.
So Calibrate ID, just a benchmark, it's a benchmarking program. It is not a survey. It is not a ranking. It's not going to be published anywhere. The data goes back to the firms that are participating to do whatever they'd like with it. It's a consortium of like-minded people who want to push this forward and understand what other firms are doing, learn from one another, et cetera. So I just want to lay that out there. That was a big piece of misunderstanding on this program at the beginning when I was pitching it to people, that they thought it was another survey, another ranking. And so I just want to throw that out there, that is not what this is. So let's talk about this. Some of the pushback that I've received in this program, in having people sign up, is that, why does this matter? I mean, I get why the diversity in lawyers matter, right? That's what the clients are asking for. And the lawyers are the ones who serve the matters. Why does it matter if the library is diverse? Why does it matter if the marketing team's diverse? Why does it matter if the billing team is diverse? Like the dot connecting there, I'm hoping that you guys can help me connect those dots. And Phyllis, this is for you. I'm hoping that you all on the panel could help me dissect this a little bit and start connecting those dots of why this actually matters. So Brian, when we were prepping, you said something, a quote that I love, and I would love for you to get at that point again here with this group.
Sure, I will. I'll try. I think I was trying to think about why we weren't being asked about diversity aside from lawyer diversity and inclusion, and I thought, well, maybe some of our clients just assume that we are doing better with diversity and inclusion among legal staff than we are among lawyers. And certainly if I look at my team, I would say, yes, my team is much more diverse than our lawyers, if you just look at the pure numbers. But I think that's a false equivalency, because, I have to say, if I look at my team in terms of diversity and inclusion and where they are in terms of seniority and job and responsibilities, we have some work to do. And I think the same thing is true among lawyers. And so you can't just look, I think it would be really lazy, for example, for clients to just say, well, we assume firms are doing better with diversity and inclusion among their legal staff, and so we're not going to ask about that. And if you look purely at the numbers, you would say, yeah, probably we are.
When I spoke to multiple directors of legal operations, general counsels, assistant general counsels, and I pitched this to them, they all literally, I did it on video so I could see what their faces, and they went, huh. Well, when I do think of staff, I do think diversity. And I said, and when you get to the non-exempt, that's my hypothesis. When you get to manager level or higher, when you get to 6 figures or higher, I think we're going to see a sharp drop in diversity across the board, right? And that's my hypothesis. We'll see, right, what the numbers show. The other thing that firms would say is like, if I look across, I think we're fine, we're good. And you know what? And I know all 3 of you will agree with this. If you don't, Peter Drucker, you don't measure it, you can't manage it. Tommy, what do you think about this topic?
Absolutely. And then I guess to continue on the Peter Drucker theme, I think one of my favorite quotes is, culture eats strategy for breakfast, right? And I think that, so for us, if you step back and look at the context of why is this important, it's because if you're looking to building an inclusive culture, which we are at BCLP, you can't exclude more than half, right? Once again, I think that's a thing, we're going to continue to echo. And think about this. I think that, one of the, as Brian said, one of the more, I think, compelling business factors is the increasing demand from clients for diversity, right? But it is ironic that it's coming, we deal it we deal it from, RFPs from the legal departments. But it would be inconceivable for these corporate clients to have their D&I efforts only touch about half their colleagues, right? I mean, it would be like, a major company is doing D&I, but it's only going to be for the marketing folks, or only going to be for finance, and then they're going to exclude all the other areas. That just doesn't make any sense, right? And if you apply that to a law firm, it doesn't make any sense. And I think that, I'll quickly say that this issue has been organically, I think, growing at BCLP. And I think, one of the starting points for this conversation was the issue during the pandemic, where everyone is switching towards, remote environments. And I think, obviously a disparate impact on working mothers, right? And I think the watershed moment is that working mothers are not just working attorney mothers, but working mothers who are on the staff side. And I think so there was the realization that, and quite honestly, our current affinity group is just for female lawyers, right? So the conversation is, well, why are the female lawyers putting on these programs for working remotely at home that's going to, help women attorneys? What about the women staff professionals, or just women, staff in general? They have the same issues, right? So that, and also, from the affinity groups, the exclusion of just non-attorneys. So I think organically, I think this is growing, but I go back to culture. We're trying to build an inclusive culture, and you can't have an inclusive culture if you're excluding more than half of your population. So those are my thoughts.
And when people start returning, and this is a Kathleen Pearson, I see you here. This is a Kathleen Pearson quote. We wrote a piece together it feels like a couple months ago. It was like maybe 7 or 8 months ago. And this is something she says: when work returns to a place and not a thing, which is going to happen, people are going to notice if you don't care. Look at diversity websites. Look at every law firm has diversity inclusion on their website. Even the firms who say in their opening paragraph, right, we have everybody matters. If you drill into the affinity groups and the scholarships and the internships and the programs, 99% of that is focused on lawyers. Your staff is going to notice if you don't care. Maithili, what is your take on this, connecting the need for this inclusivity?
So I really like something Tommy said, right, about people being impacted by what's been happening, no matter what role you occupy. And I do think we've seen that organically as well, where, for example, our Black Lawyers group has been putting forward programming that's available to lawyers and staff, because you realize that this is your broader community at the firm, right? It's actually bigger than what you thought it was if you're thinking only of lawyers. And so that's been a really nice way for people to connect and to feel that sense of belonging, to feel that sense of community, to know that it's not just the people you're working with on a day-to-day basis, but there's more people beyond that. And then I also just wanted to say that, as we think about diversity and inclusion from the client perspective as well, and we focus so much on lawyers, you're setting yourself up for great diversity and inclusion on the lawyer side of things. But if you're not doing that on the staff side of things, you're really kind of shooting yourself in the foot for your law firm's health in the future. You should be focusing on developing diverse talent. You should be focusing on developing two sides of your firm that can talk to each other and innovate together. And ultimately, that's going to impact your client service. And it's not going to be this year necessarily that you're seeing that, but as you think into the future, years ahead, you do want your lawyers and staff to be able to work closely and intricately together and serve your clients better that way.
Well, and this is a long play. If anyone plays golf, this is the long game that we're playing here, right? And let's say that the firms who are Mansfield certified, going to be Mansfield certified, let's say that they are able to retain to the level that they've committed to. So those lawyers become senior associates, they become partners, and they look across the business. Is that reflecting the community, the business? Is that the same? Are we holding ourselves accountable in that way? Because those diverse professionals, lawyers, are going to start noticing that the people that are working in the business are not diverse. And then you're going to be 5 years behind trying to catch up on that, right? All right, we've got a polling question. Would love to launch a polling question. The first one, and Debbie will get that launched for us, is: does your firm collect diversity staff data for staff? Does your firm collect? And we'll get to the next question in a second in terms of when you collect it, but just generally, does your law firm collect diversity data for staff? We'll give it 5 seconds. All right, Debbie, let's see what we've got here. 72%, very nice. I think it's telling that we've got, I don't do math, 28% who either are a no or don't know, and that's exactly the proof that I was finding in this program. There were some of our firms that started in this program who had never done a collection of this data before, and then there were some that have been doing it for years. So it's all over the place in terms of the starting point. The second polling question is, for those who answered yes, we do collect, do you do it in an ongoing way, or is it just during the onboarding process for new employees? So this is the next one. Would love your response. For anybody who said yes, we do collect. Do you do it during onboarding? So meaning one and done? Or do you do it annually, biannually, just some other regular way, or you're not sure? And while we're waiting for that, I also, Jennifer Manton made a comment that I'm sure you've all read, and how can we band together and amplify the voice of our diverse revenue enablers? I mean, if I'm talking about the Legal Marketing Association, which Jennifer and I have both been in leadership roles in, give memberships to your team, give memberships to your diverse team members. That goes for ALA, that goes for ILTA, that goes for all across the board. We can't we got to give them a platform to amplify their voices, to get involved, to have leadership and visibility in our industry. All of our sister associations around our industry rely on the law firms to give the memberships. We can't diversify our membership unless the law firms pay for the membership. So that was a shout out to the LMA and others. Okay, let's see the results of this one. How often do you collect? Onboarding only, 40%. 43%, and then not sure. So what's interesting, thank you for that, Debbie, we'll close that out. What's interesting about that is that when you collect it on onboarding only, your data becomes stale like that. So if you've got people that have worked there for 10, 15 years, you haven't given them the opportunity to reclassify themselves in other ways just beyond ethnicity, right? Diversity is not just about ethnicity. There are 50-something categories, right, where someone could be diverse. And so we're not allowing people to journey through their lives and identify themselves in a way that we could know this population and we can serve them. So I just thought that was really interesting, and thank you all for answering that. So as we talk about Calibrate ID as a program with our 10 participating firms, as I mentioned, lots of firms in different places, different evolutions. Would love to hear where your firm was at in terms of collecting the data when you signed on. And do you do an ongoing campaign to allow people, hey, it's good for address collections, it's good for all kinds of things, but there's campaigns you can do and weave it in with, we care about you, we want to know what matters to you. I mean, there's so much you can do from an employee relations standpoint. I'd love to hear where you guys are at in terms of your evolution. So Tommy, can you tell us about BCLP?
Sure. So I think where we were at the time that we joined the Calibrate ID program is that we had been for a number of years collecting this information as a normal process of the onboarding process for everyone, not just attorneys. What's interesting is that I think, you know, one of the things that we're looking at is, quite frankly, the categories that we do actually collect and that we do actually analyze and take actions on. For example, veteran status, disability, religion. Those are categories. Well, with the exception of religion, we collect that, and then, you know, and I'll give you the global perspective. And BCLP is a global firm. In the UK, you know, there's a whole, you know, different set of regulations. There's the GDPR, which really affects the ability to ask, you know, some of these opt-in calorie questions. So that's a sort of very different factor that we have to navigate through. But we do ask about religion in the UK. That's part of, you know, something that is not controversial, whereas in the US, it would be. So,
and we are going to get to some of the international components. I forgot to mention at the housekeeping, this is a domestic, US domestic only focused program for now. And Tommy and I have gone off on like rabbit hole, like trails of where we could take this, but we have to start somewhere. And so that's the somewhere we've started, which is US only. Obviously BCLP and Ballard, you guys are all internationally, have clients international, but that's the focus of this program.
Right. So I'll end with, I think there was a good question I saw in the chat about, well, it's more than collection. What do you do with that? And that's a great question because, once you have this information, I think that, we are in the process of, overhauling just all our, processes as part of our strategic growth, in terms of recruiting, development, retention, all those things, right? And specifically to drill down on the evaluation and development of everyone, right? So I think this data, is going to be crucial for us to look at, not just with the attorneys, but in terms of retention, promotion, development of diverse business services professionals, because we're utilizing the same concepts, the same tools for the attorneys. It's insane not to use the same methods for business services staff once you understand the value of doing that as well. So I think we were on our journey. I think this is a tremendous catalyst for us to accelerate, and I think to get the benefit of other peer firms. So that is a true value for us.
Brian, where was Kilpatrick when you guys signed on?
Sure. So we would fall in the classic category of collecting the information at onboarding and not really doing much beyond that. And we're still similar to what Tommy said, trying to figure out, particularly from the staff side, how to set up a process where we can have an ongoing check-in and get an accurate look at how we're doing each year. I think we've evolved to the point where we do that with our lawyers. And I think we do have that information is fairly often updated. That comes from our chief diversity and inclusion. So what I'm trying to do from a little bit of a different part of the organization, but kind of taking the seat of the client and pushing this from their point of view, kind of making the case to our HR and firm leadership that we need to have better ongoing collection and reporting practices in place.
With regard to the process when you signed on, obviously Maithili, this is her jam. She focuses on staff, which is amazing. I love that Ballard has given this resource and this focus. But Tommy, and I know Brian, your firms don't have somebody dedicated to this. So obviously you had to find internal allies to help you collect the information. It is necessary for you to be synced up with your HRIS system, whatever kind you use. Tell us about the process once you signed on, any potential roadblocks, or not roadblocks, hurdles maybe you had to overcome in order to bring this to life. Maithili, can you go first?
I will go first because that made it sound like I was providing you all the information and I very handily just gave it over to HR. And
but you are a designated shepherd of this program.
Right. I do think, this stuff is impossible without involving HR, right? And it's very, very helpful to have strong partners who are not just partners even, but allies, right? Who are personally invested in this process. And so I think I saw John here. John DeBattista, our Chief HR Officer, was very closely, there you are, very closely involved. And I know that the two of you also had conversations, when it came to, we already have all this data on hand, but then how do you kind of put it into formats that apply to all law firms or the majority of law firms? And I think that can get tricky on the staff side of things because when you think of lawyers, that every firm has partners, every firm has of counsel, every firm has associates. But on the administrative side, there are multiple different departments, multiple different roles and titles. And when we started this process of data collection, it became very clear that not everyone is called the same thing, even though they're doing similar things in the firm itself. And so I think having that close partnership with HR and having John's input and insight, even as we're thinking of what are these potential titles, what are these potential departments, I think that was really key. And then with the data collection itself and putting everything into that format, it really helped to have HR very much kind of on it and doing it, because they're also able to see, okay, here's the title, here's what we have that matches up to it. Here's a different title that, okay, maybe doesn't fit in, but then we can communicate with you and ask you, okay, how does this, you know, how are we addressing this as a group and not just as a solo law firm? Because I think that's the benefit of this.
Absolutely. And since this is the first time this has been done in this way, at this scale, we did have to take, we launched a couple months later than we thought, because we had to go through this process. And John was incredible at really like poking holes and saying, but what if, and how come, and all of that, so that we now have this incredible, mutually agreed upon from 10 different law firms from all walks of the ecosystem and profitability and footprints. And we've all agreed on, this is how we're going to report it. We've got an awesome key where you can look up a title and see where they go. And it had never been done before in that way. And we used all kinds of data points. Teresa mentioned ALA, awesome. We used the salary comp surveys that we get from Towers and other sources. And we just put our heads together and really figured this out. And it was interesting, particularly at Ballard, there were a couple of additional things that sort of cropped up at the end. And we were like, where do we put these? And we've made note of it, and we're going to keep iterating every year until we get it going. It's never been done before. So it was an amazing journey to get going. I would love to hear from you, Tommy, in terms of, okay, rubber hits the road, we got to report, we got to get this data. What were some of the things you had to do in order to bring it to life?
Sure. So I think we're fortunate in that, you know, we have a very, I think, established HRS, department, and it wasn't too difficult for them to pull this information. The challenge, however, is competing for their time and attention amongst all the other things that we have going on at the firm, right? I mean, we're just not, we're in the queue. Fortunately, I think, a very strong advocate that we have is the chief people a person at the firm who is a strong believer in this. And I think, once we proposed this, it was quickly approved by her and firm leadership. I think everyone, as I said, organically realizes the emergent importance of this issue. But quite frankly, it's balancing this important issue with all the other important issues that we have at the firm. And I think so you're competing for bandwidth, you're competing for resources. So I think that is sort of the challenge and opportunity for us in the I&D team to really be a very forceful advocate as to the importance of this thing so that it's up there with the priorities. And
we're finding at Calibrate, we're flexible. Right? We understand that the majority of D&I professionals, HR professionals, I mean, not only are the HR folks trying to figure out how to get people back to work, if they're going to get done, what's the policy? And then you've got, the D&I piece of it. People are overstretched. It's too much. People are working 137%. It's too much, right? And so in order to foster this, we're being flexible about when you get your data in, and we're doing point in time and we're iterating. And so that's the thing that we've learned, is that if we truly want this to take off, we're going to be flexible. Brian, what about you guys? What are some of the little hurdles you've had to jump over the course of this process?
So all the ones that Maithili and Tommy mentioned, and I think the one that is really just the hardest, practically speaking, is, I spent more time over the last year with our chief of HR than my kids. I mean, we're together all the time on a range of issues. And so, one of the things Jen was going to have to get on the phone with her to kind of walk her through what we were doing and why that was helpful. Hopefully as this gains traction and, you get more and more firms, you won't have to get on the phone with everyone because that could take some time, but that's probably going to be what it takes in some cases. We've still got some work to do. And we're like, for example, we're in the middle of reviews right now, and getting her attention is like not happening. Right. So you need to be patient and really nail down kind of the why and the rationale for your HR team and management, because HR is going to have confidentiality concerns. They're going to have a whole range of concerns, and you need to Jen, I think would be happy to work with you on how to frame it.
Yeah, a lot of firms are super skittish. What are you doing with this? Who's going to see it? How are we going to report? I mean, we've had, you know, it's been over-lawyered. The lawyers have over-lawyered this thing, right? I know some of you can appreciate that, where it's been like, well, what, how, and is this, right? So I will say that this group, the founding firms of this program, decided specifically to not include compensation in this for now. At this point, the group decided, and John, we went back and forth about this, that we decided we're not in that conversation maybe yet. So it's more about, who do we have? What kinds of roles do they have? Are they progressing in the organization? Start really looking at it from a more analytical mindset. And so we'll get to that in a second. But just so you know, I'm happy to have a conversation with anybody who's skittish. And I think these three, and of course our other 7 firms, would be happy to talk to anyone about the confidentiality. I'll sign, you can lawyer me, it's fine. I'll sign all the things. Okay, so I'm mindful that we have only 14 minutes left and a couple more topics to hit. So I'd love to go to our next polling question, if that's okay. Debbie, we'd love to ask you, and we're going to get into what these 3 firms are doing for their staff at the moment. But the polling question is, does your firm include your staff in your ERGs or your affinity groups currently? We did this as a flash poll about 9 months ago or so, and it was about 80% of firms that responded at that point said, no, we don't have programs for our staff. So we'll give this 5 more seconds. Do you include people? We have them only for lawyers, yes, but they're separate, or we have groups that include everyone together. All right, Debbie, let's see the results. Nice, look at that. I would say that's different than 9 months ago. And I love it. Love, love, love it. All right, so we'll close that out. Would love to ask the panelists, what initiatives do you guys have going for the firm? And this goes back, I don't know if you guys saw the chat. Jillian said, including business professionals, which is what what to call them, revenue enablers. Challenging and include them in diversity meetings, invite them to be speakers, newsletters, publications, websites, D&I. So Maithili, will you go first on this one about what kind of programs you guys, and one of the things that I've learned about firms is there's some firms that are expecting just programmatic, like put a program together, include people, as opposed to a cultural shift, which are 2 different approaches. So Maithili, what do you guys have cooking right now that's exciting from the staff side?
Lots of things.
Well, now's the time to toot your horn.
There is definitely a programmatic component to it, right? Where you do need to launch initiatives that are specifically focused on staff. We have a peer mentorship group. We have started social educational ideas as well that seek to create community, like book clubs, for example. Some of what is happening is something we're seeing organically, where we're seeing that our business resource groups are becoming more intentional about including staff, even though they may have been started only to serve the needs of lawyers. We're seeing that new groups that are starting up are intentionally being open to lawyers and staff. And then there's also the piece about, making sure that what we're offering in terms of education, for example, is offered to the whole firm, right? There isn't, if you're only going to educate your lawyers about diversity and inclusion and what's happening right now and what people need to be aware of and how to support coworkers, you're leaving out half of your population. And so it is necessary for our lawyers and our staff to get that same education, to get that same kind of shared understanding and develop that. So I think that's definitely something, and that's something that has been facilitated, I think, by the pandemic and having everything be virtual and our ability to offer things to more people. And then there is the whole other kind of behind the scenes aspect of thinking about how you are taking some of the data that you're seeing and applying it the same way you would for lawyers, right? You're looking at performance evaluations, you're looking at all of these different things that contribute to true inclusion for your diverse staff as well.
Tommy, what about a BCLP? What do you have brewing, cooking for the staff side of the house?
So speaking of culture, one major thing that we just completed was a pulse survey, a short pulse survey on inclusion within your team, within your practice group, within your offices for everyone that went out to all 1,300 employees, worldwide. We've just sort of gotten the results back. We're analyzing that, and we're doing sort of town halls and office meetings to communicate, because I think, when you do a survey, there's the expectation that, there's going to be some action following the results. So we clearly are mindful of that. And, just the fact of the variety in terms of the response rate between different offices, that's a data point there. So I think this is going to reinforce the general idea that, I&D is meant for everyone, because this survey went out to everyone, not just the lawyers. So what we're going to follow up with this is firm-wide training. We've had training on unconscious bias, which was, kind of a long time ago. So we're following this up with, training that's going to geared to respond to these general things that were identified, but also our huge emphasis is on developing a speak up, stand up culture. And this is once again related to the external events. So I think that, I go back to culture is huge for us. We see all these things as, moving towards a more inclusive culture. So that's one of our major things.
And a more inclusive culture equals what for business?
Well,
more money,
more profitability, right? Absolutely.
I mean,
yeah.
that's the piece it blows my mind that connection hasn't been made. I've literally been argued with about, I don't understand. I mean, the lawyers are the ones that do the work, and that's client. But I mean, if you don't have a staff to fuel the lawyers to do their work, then they're not going to be as successful. Yeah. So I also wanted to comment on something Mark Beasy said with regard to, we could look at the big four. Absolutely, 100%. And that is part of the value proposition of belonging to the Calibrate ID program, is that this summer, after we finish giving everybody back their scorecards, we're going to be running roundtables. And I'm bringing in speakers from the big four, from Accenture, right, to talk about what can we learn, not only from the folks that are tasked with bringing these programs to life for their firms, but I mean, Accenture's got an incredible talent analytics group that they do consulting right for their clients. We're going to bring in speakers to really learn how we can all do this together. All right, I have a question now. What is our dream scenario 5 years from now? What's our dream scenario for this industry as it relates to inclusion? Maithili?
So I would say, really, I would hope for an integrated diversity and inclusion strategy that addresses lawyers and staff across the entire life cycle, right? And I definitely see a need, for example, for career pathing, professional development. I would also love to see more, when law firms talk about their diversity and inclusion, for them to be featuring not just their diverse attorneys, but also their diverse staff. And we've started to do that a little bit ourselves, but yeah, to see that globally would be great. And
the thing about that is that I think law firms tend to be hesitant to highlight their staff because of the churn. People move around so often. Lawyers tend to stay put a little bit longer. But the reality is, if you have a program like this and it works, your retention is going to be off the charts. And companies like mine won't have as much work to do, right? That's the idea. And so the retention piece is good for business, and it will enable you to be able to highlight your staff, because you know that they're in it for the long haul with you and your firm. Tommy, what's your dream purple spotted unicorn scenario 5 years from now?
So aspirationally, I think it's an environment where if you don't have that conspicuous diversity across all levels, staff, that people internally will ask about it and look for it. I think that's a true measure of success. When it's no longer the I&D, team, shouting and screaming about the lack of diversity or the importance of diversity. It's when everyone understands, wow, this is not, whether it's hiring, whether it's promoting, whether it's, anything where, hey, this is not, where's the diversity? I think that's a true measure of success, when everyone in the organization understands, hey, we need to have diversity. It's not here. Let's do something about it.
And by the way, it's not a Band-Aid. It's not a tape and glue situation. We're pouring concrete, right? That's what we need to be doing. Brian, what's your dream scenario here?
So my dream scenario would rarely involve being asked more questions on an RFP, for example. But I think I would view it as success if we were more often asked about the diversity of our organization as a whole, than just one segment of it, and we could give an answer that we were proud of. And I think a world in which our clients view themselves as trying to solve these issues and these problems with us, rather than looking at us to solve them for the entire industry, because we are outside law firms are an even smaller percentage of the industry than the corporate legal departments. So it has to be a holistic solution, and we've got to get to the point of understanding that that's what it's going to take.
One of the things that I'd like to see is this consortium of firms working together as a cohesive unit to bring awareness that law firms could be a destination for your career, right? So what if this consortium of firms got together and went to the HBCUs, some of the HBCUs around the country, and as a group, like, represented one another and said, you could have a career in finance, you could have a career in marketing, you could have a career in IT in law firms. People don't know about a law firm as a place where they can have a career, literally, unless they know about it. I mean, most folks think it's only, you could be a paralegal, you could be a lawyer. I mean, I fell into it, accident, oopsies. I thought I wanted to go to law school, and I went to the law firm to see what it was all about. And I stepped foot and I realized I didn't want to have, at the time, I didn't want to have my nose in a book all day and writing on my legal pad. But I liked the business side. So what if we're in a place where this group is developing a pipeline of talent, right? So in 5 to 10 years, we can point to 40 or 50 new people that we've brought into the industry as a result of just us banding together to bring awareness of law firms as a destination for your career path.
So Jen,
yeah.
if I could, so for my, I was in the automotive business for a long time. That's the exact same issue that we dealt with, which is that, outside of Detroit, if you told someone that you worked for an automotive manufacturer or an OEM, they say, well, what dealership do you work at, right? So the assumption was that the automotive industry was solely at the dealership level. So we did exactly that. We went to the Society of Women Engineers. We were at, the Black MBA to convince people to advocate that there are careers in legal, in finance, in marketing, in the automotive industry to get more diverse folks to consider the idea of a career in the automotive industry. So exactly that same issue.
Amazing. And I remember you told me that, and I appreciate you remembering to bring that up to the group. We've got 2 minutes left. Would you guys like to say anything in closing? This part wasn't planned, so I put you on the spot. Anything in closing? Otherwise, we have time for one more question if anybody would like to ask anything. Listen, we were planned up until this exact moment. Hope you could all tell.
I'll chime in. I think, one of the most important things here, to me at least, is to see that half of our business, right, half of our people are being valued and recognize that they're being valued, feel that they're being valued in the same way as we do for our lawyers as well. And that, I think, is going to contribute to ultimately the health of the firm and the ability you have to provide your clients with the best services.
Yeah, and I'll add that, look, there's strength in numbers, so it's great that we have 71 folks on right now. I think the more folks that we can engage in the conversation and then to go back to their respective organizations and have this conversation, that will just lead to a more collective progress.
Well, I appreciate you all for taking time out of your day to talk about your firm's involvement in this program. And anyone who knows me knows that I'd love to continue talking about this, but our time has run out. If you'd like to know more about Calibrate ID, let me know for sure. I know that Maithili, Tommy, and Brian would be very happy to answer your questions. And we wish you all a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thanks, everyone.